Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're digging into a story that's just been all over the headlines for years now.
Absolutely. We're talking about a figure who's often painted as, a fugitive, a defaulter.
Yeah, quite a contrast to the whole King of Good Times image he used to have.
Exactly. We're diving into the really complex world of Vijay Mallya.
There's just so much out there, isn't there? And a
Mhm.
lot of it clashes. But for this deep dive, we've got something specific.
Right. We're focusing on a source, a recent, pretty extensive public interview he gave after years of staying quiet, basically.
So this is him, in his own words, presenting his side of things.
That's the key. And our mission here isn't to judge, or say if he's right or wrong.
No, not at all. We're just here to unpack that interview. What did he say?
Exactly. Pull out the key insights, understand his take on, what went right, what went wrong, according to him,
Look at the financial angles, the political stuff he brings up.
and help you, the listener, kind of navigate all this information, but specifically through the lens of this interview.
Super important.
Hmm.
We're staying impartial, just reporting what's in the source.
Precisely. What he said, the facts he presented.
Okay, so let's get into it. To really grasp his account, we probably need to go back, way back, before Kingfisher Airlines became the big story.
Right. Who was Vijay Mallya before all the headlines?
What does he say about his early life?
Well, according to him, in this interview, he talks about being born in Kolkata, childhood there, and in Bangalore, then back to Kolkata for school, college.
Mm-hmm.
He calls his upbringing very normal, but definitely strict. His father, Vijay Mallya.
Right, the original Mallya business figure.
Yeah, he describes him as exceptionally intelligent, went to Dune School, apparently topped his class.
So high standards set early on.
Very much so.
Yeah.
He says his father expected the same from him academically.
Did he mention any specific things his father said that really stuck with him?
He did, yeah. He highlights two things that had a profound impact. First, the whole succession thing. His father apparently told him straight up, if you're not good enough, you are not going to step into my shoes.
Wow, no guarantees then. Earn it.
Pretty much. And the second one, maybe even more shaping, was about the political climate back then. The socialist policies in India.
Ah, right. That era.
His father warned him something like, look, I say step into my shoes, but there might be no shoes. The government might take everything away.
So the only real inheritance
Is your education, so take it seriously. That was the message.
That's powerful. That idea that business is fragile, government can intervene, education is key, ingrained from the start.
Seems like it. And he draws a real contrast between himself and his father, personality-wise.
How so?
He says his father was very shy of public speaking, totally the opposite, whereas he sees himself as very confident publicly.
Which some people saw as arrogance later.
That's what he suggests. He puts it down to school debates, drama, says that confidence is just his natural way when speaking publicly, not showing off.
Interesting. So strict dad, high expectations, awareness of political risk.
Mm-hmm.
How did he actually get started in business?
Well, he talks about training, spending time in America, working directly with his father.
Learning the ropes.
Yeah. And his first, what he calls bold step, was asking his dad for 10 lakhs rupees.
10 lakhs back then. Quite a sum. For what?
Specifically to market Kingfisher beer, he saw this old 1857 label in the archives, got inspired, wanted to make it a fun brand.
Okay. And he mentions learning about marketing.
Right, from interactions in Kolkata, his time in the U.S., he saw some ad campaigns there that, really made an impact on him.
But marketing alcohol in India back then.
Yeah.
Tricky, right? With the restrictions. He called it a media dark environment.
Exactly. Direct ads were banned. And this is where he claims his marketing smarts really kicked in.
How did he get around it?
Surrogate advertising.
Yeah.
But he stresses it wasn't just like a label slap. He says he built real substantial businesses.
Like what?
Kingfisher Water, Kingfisher Packaged Soda, stuff like that. Made them profitable enough on their own to justify advertising them widely.
Ah, I see. So the advertising for the water or soda also promoted the main Kingfisher brand indirectly. Clever.
That was the strategy, according to him. Give the brands a colorful personality. And he became the face, didn't he?
Very much so. The brand ambassador.
Yeah, he says he consciously did that. Appeared in ads even, he points out, a public service one against drinking and driving, to show commitment there too.
Okay, but what about the big one? The King of Good Times tag. Where did that come from in his telling?
His story is that phrase was originally for the beer, celebratory, fun.
For the brand, not the man.
That's his claim. He says the media picked it up and applied it to him personally because, well, his name under that banner sells magazines, TV time.
So he's saying the media created that persona for their own benefit.
Largely, yes. He says he didn't chase the headlines, but they found him useful. He defines his flamboyance as just, loving life and appreciating the good things.
And he contrasted his lifestyle back then, when he was young chairman.
Yeah, he was 28, enjoying cars, parties, music, sports. Like what he calls moderately wealthy 28-year-old.
Yeah.
He points out his peers in business were his father's age, more conservative.
And he insists he used his own money.
His own money, yeah. Not company funds for that lifestyle. And again, claims he wasn't seeking the media spotlight, they just amplified it.
So the showman image, largely a media creation in his view, though he acknowledges being a public promoter, this distinction seems really key to his narrative now.
Definitely. And becoming chairman itself, that happened suddenly, didn't it?
Yeah, his father passed away unexpectedly.
Right. Vijay Mallya was only 59. Vijay was just 27. He describes it as tough, facing these senior guys in UB Group who probably expected to take over.
How did he secure the position?
He says it came down to shareholder support at an AGM. They backed him, the young son, over the others, so he became chairman at 27.
And then he made changes to how the group was run.
Yes, he talks about putting in a decentralized management structure between 83 and 87.
Why was that important? According to him.
He claims it let the Indian and the foreign businesses run well, kind of independently, which freed him up.
Freed him up for
International stuff, like buying Burger Paints Global. And, significantly, becoming an NRI, a non-resident Indian, in 1988.
The NRI status. That comes up later, doesn't it?
It does. He mentions having an RBI letter from 88 confirming it, which limited his time in India to 180 days a year. That becomes relevant to his departure story.
So that early restructuring enabled his international focus and NRI status, in his view. How does he sort of sum up the difference between his father's style and his own?
He puts it quite simply. His dad, Vithal, would think 100 times before spending. Vijay probably thought twice.
Different generations, different styles.
Exactly. Different ages, goals. He contrasts his public speaking confidence with his father's shyness again.
And the bottom line.
He says, look, his dad was the careful businessman, but it was the showman himself who created the world's largest alcoholic beverage company. Something he thinks his father would have been proud of.
Okay, so that sets the stage, the background, the rise, the style. Now let's get to the big one. Kingfisher Airlines. How did that decision actually happen, according to his interview?
Well, first off, he totally rejects the story about it being a birthday gift for his son, calls that complete baloney.
So, not an impulse buy. What was it then?
He presents it as a thought-out business move. The idea apparently came from the Damana brothers to his CFO. The CFO brought it to Mallya, suggesting it was an opportune time to get into aviation. They reviewed it, decided to go for it.
A strategic decision, vetted internally. Was UB Group already diversifying?
He makes a point of saying yes. Even under his father, they'd gone into food processing, petrochemicals, so airlines wasn't totally out of the blue for the group's strategy.
Right, and his vision for the airline at launch, what was he aiming for?
Pretty grand vision. The best flying experience India had ever seen. That's what he says he wanted. Premium service, comfort, safety, new routes.
And he hired professionals from the start.
Emphasizes that. A full-blown professional management team from the U.S. hired before the first plane even landed to show it was serious, professionally run.
Okay, vision set. What about the actual business model? There's some confusion there about low cost versus premium.
He clarifies this. Says Kingfisher did start as single-class, low-cost, but REIT, with key differences from day one.
Like what?
In-flight entertainment, meals included, stuff other low-cost carriers weren't doing then.
So, differentiated low cost. He pushes back against the idea he promised one thing and switched.
Yeah, he directly addresses a claim attributed to Alex Wilcox, an early hire, about promising low cost then changing. Mallya says Wilcox is either misinformed or he hasn't seen that comment himself.
So his version, always intended to be a better experience, even within a single class initially. He talked about little things too.
Absolutely. Air hostesses cleaning reading glasses, calling passengers guests, the food quality, seat pitch.
Attention to detail.
He claims so. And he mentions personally tracking on-time performance daily in the first year, checking SMS updates from every airport manager, showing his hands-on approach then.
Sounds like a solid start, focused strategy. So what went wrong? What does he say caused the turbulence?
He points the finger squarely at the 2008 global financial crisis. Says that was a massive turning point.
Impacted the whole sector.
Yeah, globally and in India. He talks about a key meeting he had with Pranab Mukherjee, the finance minister at the time.
What happened in that meeting?
This is a huge claim in his narrative. He says he told the FM the airline was struggling, needed to downsize, cut planes, cut staff because of the bad economy.
And the response was?
According to Mallya, he was told not to downsize, that connectivity, jobs were too important for the country. And, crucially, he claims he was assured banks will support you.
Wow. So he's saying the government told him not to cut back and promised bank support.
That's his explicit claim. He says that is how it all started, linking that directive and promise directly to the subsequent massive loans and ultimately the problems. He does add, the banks did initially provide support after that.
That is a very significant claim about government influence on a business decision, with huge consequences. What about the Air Deccan acquisition? That's often called a big mistake. Happened before the crisis, in 2007.
He tackles that head on, too. It cost about $137 million. People said he overpaid, but he lays out his business logic.
Which was?
Consolidation. Getting rid of a disruptor, Deccan's super cheap tickets were hurting everyone, he says. Plus, commonality. Both used Airbus, similar pilot pools. Deccan was based in Bangalore, like Kingfisher.
So strategic reasons. But wasn't the story that he bought it just to get around the 5-year rule for international flight?
He calls that complete nonsense. Says no one at UB was that dumb. He argues Deccan filled a different need, a single-class, price-sensitive option for the bulk of India, complementing Kingfisher First's business class.
And he insists Kingfisher's failure wasn't because of buying Deccan.
Firmly denies it. Says the failure came from totally separate reasons. The post-2008 economy, fuel price policies, mounting losses from those external factors.
He even defended rebranding Deccan as Kingfisher Red alongside Kingfisher First.
Yeah, compared it to Coca-Cola having Coke, Diet Coke, Coke Zero, different products for different segments, and he dismisses criticism about offering food entertainment on Kingfisher Red. Saying Indians love food and entertainment, and the IFE system didn't cost much daily once installed. Basically argued critics lacked domain knowledge of aviation.
So the narrative he presents is failure driven by external factors in policy, not his core strategy or the Deccan deal, but the losses mounted, leading to a cash flow crisis.
Yeah, he talks about the working capital cycle getting totally messed up. Couldn't pay oil bills, then had to pay in advance, squeezing cash more, airport fees, landing charges.
And when cash flow dries up?
It hits everyone, he says. You can't just pick and choose who gets paid when there's no money coming in.
Which brings us to the really painful part.
Yeah.
Employees not getting paid. A huge point of criticism.
He acknowledges this. Says staff were sadly not paid, and it caused him personal pain, especially given his claimed history of treating employees well in other UB companies.
But what's his explanation why they weren't paid?
This is crucial to his account. He says the company in India simply had no money. Why? But 260 crores of UB Group's money was frozen by the Karnataka High Court.
Frozen by the court. At whose request?
At the bank's objection, he claims. The banks were trying to recover their loans and objected to that money being used elsewhere.
So he's saying the money that could have paid salaries was locked up legally.
That's his assertion. He says they even applied to the court, asked them to release that 260 crores specifically for salaries.
Yeah.
The banks objected, arguing the money was theirs due to the default, and the court refused the application. So no funds released for salaries.
That's a bombshell claim, basically blaming the banks and the legal process for the inability to pay salaries, not a lack of will or funds within the wider group.
It's a very specific and blame-shifting explanation he offers in the interview. He also addresses the point about international staff being paid while Indian staff weren't.
How does he explain that discrepancy?
Simple geography, according to him. Money from international ticket sales was available overseas, so those staff could be paid. In India, the cash was frozen by the court order.
What about his own alleged salary? That huge figure, 33 crores a year from Kingfisher.
Flat denial. Says, show me the proof, show me the balance sheet. He states clearly he took no salary when others weren't being paid, asks why he would do that.
The interview also covered the tragic suicide of an employee's wife. How did you respond to that?
He says he was aware and claims his own investigation showed it was linked to a long-standing marital dispute. But he concedes it was convenient for people to blame Kingfisher and the non-payment.
So it expresses sympathy, but disputes the direct cause.
Yes. expresses sympathy for the family, but sticks to his investigation's findings. He says if people want to blame him for the non-payment circumstances, he'll take the blame, but denies it was willful or that he was enriching himself while employees suffered.
Which leads right into the other major criticism.
Yeah.
His lifestyle. The parties, the cars, the spending while the airline was collapsing or after. The big 60th birthday bash in 2015.
He tackles this directly. On things like the Tipu Sultan sword or cars, he argues their value wouldn't have saved the airline anyway, wouldn't have paid salaries.
Okay, but the perception.
His main defense for the lifestyle, the party, is his other businesses. United Spirits, United Breweries, MCF. They were doing well, employing thousands. Was he supposed to just lay low, ignore them and their shareholders?
And the party itself. Who paid?
He insists he paid personally. Kingfisher was obviously in no position to pay. He does concede. Maybe holding it publicly in India was a mistake. Maybe should have done it privately abroad. But says he was transparent.
So his line is, personal spending came from other successful businesses. Media blew it up, and he had obligations to his other companies.
Pretty much. He feels the media narrative is not facts, just a story that sells. And he expresses real frustration that people only talk about Kingfisher failing.
Ignoring the successes.
Yeah, ignoring what he claims were decades of building United Spirits, United Breweries into huge wealth creators for shareholders and employees. Amongst the highest in India, he claims.
Okay, so failure driven by externals, cash blocked legally, lifestyle funded elsewhere. That's his framing. Let's get into the loans themselves, the core dispute.
Right, he's very precise here. Kingfisher Airlines, the company, borrowed the money from a consortium 15-16 government banks.
And his role?
Guarantor.
He, Vijay Mallya, personally guaranteed the loans, as did United Breweries Holdings Limited, UBHL. He repeats, I never borrowed one naya paisa.
Why is that distinction so important to him? He uses it to fight the chore thief label. Says, if I plan to steal it, why would I give a personal guarantee? That legally ties me to repaying if the company fails. He sees it as proof of good intent.
Okay, guarantor status is evidence. What about collateral? The story often focuses just on Kingfisher shares.
He says that's wrong, or at least incomplete. Yes, Kingfisher shares were part of it, but it was a multiple basket of securities.
Explaining.
Several other stocks, shares, property, he lists, not just the airline shares, and he disputes they are valued too high. Saying professional merchant bankers, including SBI Capital Markets, did the valuation. It wasn't just some number he dreamed up.
And he uses the eventual huge recovery amount to back this up.
Exactly. Asks, where did the 14,100 crores they recovered come from, if not from his wider pledged assets? UBL shares, USL shares, etc. Argues the media focuses selectively to discredit him.
Was he asked if the banks lent based on business sense or maybe government pressure?
He mostly deflected that, said, you should ask them this question. But he did hint that sometimes, with support from the finance minister, banks might have stretched lending norms for Kingfisher, expressed gratitude for that past support.
He also makes a big point about putting his own group's money into the airline.
A very big point. Claims he put in 3,000 crores from the UB group to try and save Kingfisher.
Countering the idea he took money out.
Precisely. Says, how can they accuse me of siphoning when I poured in 3,000 crores? He mentions Kiran Mazumdar Shah supporting this, saying he put everything on the line, feels this isn't appreciated.
Which connects to the willful defaulter tag. How does he define that, and why does he say it's wrong in his case?
His definition. Someone who has the money but won't pay. He argues it's a false premise for him because his assets were frozen.
The same assets they later recovered from.
Right. He says, you freeze my assets, make it impossible for me to access funds, then call me a willful defaulter for not paying. He sees a total contradiction.
And beyond frozen assets, he claims he tried to pay.
This is absolutely central to his argument. He states he made 4 settlement offers to the banks between 2012 and 2015, plus others later, even before the Supreme Court.
All refused.
All refused, he claims. Recalls flying to Hyderabad to meet the SBI chairwoman personally with an offer. Insists his intention was always to settle. Never refused to pay, just couldn't agree on terms or access funds.
Why does he think they refused?
His take is blunt. They wanted 14,100 crores. He implies they held out for the maximum possible recovery rather than settling earlier for potentially less, maybe closer to the 6,200 crore DRT figure. Claims proof of the offers is in Supreme Court records.
Okay, so his defense against willful defaulter, assets frozen, plus multiple rejected settlement offers. This whole situation that escalated into major legal and political battles.
Yeah, around 2015, the big agencies got involved, CBI and ED. Mallya says he appeared before the CBI 4 times.
And he denies the CBI concluded he was siphoning money.
Strongly denies that conclusion. He outlines what he understands were the main CBI allegations against him.
Such as
Misusing the Kingfisher private jet for personal trips. He admits using it for holidays, but questions if that's misuse for a company chairman. And misrepresenting things to IDBI Bank when getting their loan, especially the brand valuation.
what about that IDBI loan specifically? The story about it being approved super fast, maybe suspiciously.
He addresses that, says the initial 900 crore loan story approved in 2 days on a Sunday. He claims that was a short-term loan, it's repaid, and then IDBI joined the main lending consortium. He points out IDBI later reported recovering their money in full, 753 crores. Calls the collusion idea inconceivable, given he met senior execs and the board approved it.
And the ED Enforcement Directorate. They alleged laundering of over 3,500 crores.
Mallya confirms that number, 3,547 crores, matches the total borrowing, but he fights the word laundered. Asks, what does that mean? Did I steal it? Fund my lifestyle. Where's the proof of Kingfisher money buying overseas property? Says there's none.
His general stance towards the agencies.
Pretty hostile. Claims they concoct, fabricate, and present false evidence. Says he's still waiting for proof of guilt. Insists he's innocent until proven guilty.
There's also controversy around a lookout circular, an LOC, issued against him.
He claims he wasn't really aware of the details, the issuance, the alleged change in wording from detain to inform. When the interviewer mentioned a story about him meeting someone powerful of potentially influencing that change, Mallya just said, I've never heard of this before. Dismisses it as speculation.
But he does confirm meeting the finance minister, Arun Jaitley, on the day he left India.
Yes, he gives his version of that. March 2, 2016. Says he bumped into Jaitley walking from Parliament to the airport, told him he was going to London, Geneva for a meeting, would be back, and asked him to push the banks to settle.
And Jaitley's reaction later.
Mallya recounts Jaitley initially denied it in the media, then later called it a fleeting meeting after a Congress MP said they saw them. Mallya sees this as political spin.
So his narrative is, he didn't flee. He left openly on a planned trip after telling the FM.
Exactly. Counters the Bhagya, fled story hard. Reminds people he's been a UK resident for decades, NRI status limiting his time in India anyway. Says he flew out normally, pre-scheduled trip, Jet Airways flight. The fugitive media frenzy started after he left, he claims.
Why didn't he come back later then?
Says the environment in India got too hot and too hostile. Made negotiations impossible. Plus, he needed to be overseas, he claims, to arrange selling international securities to raise money for the banks.
And then his passport was revoked.
Right. April 2016. Revoked, not just suspended. He sees this as physically preventing his return. Asks if it was done deliberately to trap him abroad. Questions the denial of his constitutional right to a passport.
Which led to the extradition request from India.
He calls the extradition process a show of things. Keeps asking what crime warrants this. Demands primacy evidence of theft, laundering, etc. Reiterates his core line. Always been honest and truthful, never borrowed, and I have never cheated.
He connects this back to the willful defaulter tag again.
Uses the asset freezing against it. If my assets were frozen, which is how they recovered the money, how could I have the money to willfully default? Points again to the rejected settlement offers from 2012-15.
He even mentioned an anecdote about an SBI official fearing the CBI if they settled.
Yeah, suggesting political or agency pressure stopped the bank settling earlier, calls the CBI a cage parrot in that context.
Now let's get to those crucial numbers he highlights. The debt versus the recovery. This seems central to his current argument.
Absolutely central. He presents 2 figures, claiming they come from official sources. 1, the Debt Recovery Tribunal, DRT, certified debt from 2017, 6,203.35 crores, principal plus interest. He insists this is the real number, calls the common 9,000 crore figure imagination. 2, the recovery acknowledged by the Indian Government Ministry of Finance, 14,100 crores. He references an official report or statement confirming this figure.
So recovery, 40,100 crores. Certified debt, 6,203 crores. That's more than double recovered.
Exactly. That massive difference is his key point. How can I be a chore who duped the banks if they recovered this much? Largely from my assets. He even notes PM Modi quoted 9,000 CR debt, 14,000 CR recovery, asking where the 9,000 came from if DLT said 6,200. Suggests it shows intense government focus on him, making him a political football.
And despite this huge recovery, he claims the banks won't give him a final account statement.
It's a bizarre claim he makes. Says the same banks, despite 15 reminders, refused to provide a full statement of account showing how the 14,100 CR was applied against the 6,203 CR debt, even after recovery officers apparently confirmed full recovery.
He's gone to court over this.
Yes, filed a petition in Karnataka High Court pleading for an order forcing banks to provide this statement. Calls it exceptionally strange, maybe unique globally.
What about findings against him in international courts? Switzerland, France, UK.
He pushes back hard. Says Swiss and French authorities only froze accounts based on Indian requests, no independent finding of guilt. UK extradition court. Its job, he explains, is only to see if there's a prima facie case for trial in India, not to decide guilt. He acknowledges they found a prima facie case, so it proceeds to trial stage in India.
He also refuted specific agency allegations in detail.
Yeah, the IDBI collusion idea, inconceivable. Board approved it. Brand valuation hired professionals. Grant Thornton. Banks accepted their report, so how is it fraud? Siphoning 423 CR argues airlines have to send money overseas for leases, spares, etc. Claims CBI twists legitimate costs into siphoning. F1 RCB spending says F1 team sent money back to Kingfisher. RCB was just advertising sponsorship. Argues a judge will decide if that's misuse.
His overarching point seems to be about how business failure is treated in India.
That's a major theme. He argues in India, business failure means fraud. If your company fails, you're automatically suspected of stealing, especially from public banks. Compares himself to Naresh Goyal, Jet Airways, Gautam Thapar. Notes they also face jail. Says risk is normal in business worldwide, but in India, failure gets criminalized.
And he feels personally targeted. A political pawn.
Strongly believes so. A poster boy for the government, a political football between parties. Thinks his high visibility made him an easy target, suits the narrative to show action against a big name.
So, summing up his perspective from the interview. A business failure due to external factors, government policy missteps, complicated by legal blocks on funds, followed by what he sees as baseless criminal charges, despite him being a guarantor, putting in his own money, offering settlements, and ultimately having assets seized that repaid more than double the certified debt. It's quite the counter-narrative.
It absolutely is. It challenges the public story at almost every turn, using his specific interpretation of events, figures, and alleged motivations.
Okay, let's shift to his life now. How does he describe living in the UK these days?
Sort of semi-retired pace, he says. Lives in a house, has dogs, enjoys classic cars, still runs an office next door, mainly for his core alcohol businesses.
Those businesses fund his legal battles.
That's what he claims, yes. Says they pay for the very expensive legal matters. He acknowledges the big change used to travel constantly, now stuck in one country for 9 years because his passport was revoked. Calls it a game changer, but insists he's tough, not bothered, adjusted.
What about family? How have they coped? His mother, father.
Says his mother, also in England for decades, gets very upset by the Indian media coverage, reduced to tears. He says he's more thick-skinned, ignores it, but it hurts her. His father misses him, but it's been 40 years. Hopes his dad would be proud of the business building, but certainly not proud of me being called chore. Learned hard work, reading a balance sheet from him. Briefly mentions closeness to Kiran Mazumdar Shah, grateful for her support.
Does he feel isolated? Lonely?
Denies it. Says he's always busy, dogs, cars, business, legal stuff. Pace slowed to semi-retirement, but enough interests. Claims he rarely gets flustered, thinks the media hates that he doesn't crumble and collapse. Stays strong, kept it together during the crisis for his other companies.
And he regrets looking back.
One main one he voices. After all his work building businesses, the narrative made him a zero from a hero. And specific sadness about Kingfisher failing. Says he wasn't used to business failure. That hurts me more than anything else. Sees it as a great product lost to bad circumstances.
He also tackled the perception of his extreme wealth.
Yeah, dismisses that idea. Says the king of good times perception came from brand marketing the calendar, sports sponsorships, etc., funded by the brand, not his pocket, he claims. Says assets in India are gone, UK lifestyle is comfortable but normal. Calls the idea he's super rich now a major misconception.
So the image was marketing. Media amplified it, not reality, especially now.
That's his view. Never controlled his image, media used his name because it sells. Expresses frustration at being called chore, even after repaying 2.5 times the debt, he claims. Says it's why he stayed quiet for 9 years.
He mentioned that Karnataka High Court petition again?
Just to reiterate, it's solely to force the banks to give him that statement of account. Finds their refusal baffling. Says he's open to an independent audit anytime, Nothing to hide.
And finally, the future. Any chance of returning to India?
Says he'll fight the legal cases on merit. Asks, what have I done wrong? Believes the court trial issues, IDBI loan misrepresentation collusion, misuse of funds, lack evidence, has a robust defense. Return to India. He says he'd consider it if assured a fair trial, but immediately adds the CBIE track record with others doesn't inspire too much confidence. Questions what guarantees he'd need. He also offered some what-ifs. Maybe he shouldn't have started Kingfisher Airlines at all, stuck to alcohol. Regrets listening to Pranab Mukherjee in 2008, wishes he had downsized Kingfisher, then thinks it might still be flying today if he had.
So, starting the airline and not downsizing it in '08, key decisions he might change in hindsight.
Those are the specific regrets he mentioned in terms of strategic choices.
Well, that really was a deep dive into an incredibly layered story, wasn't it? All viewed through this specific detailed account from Vijay Mallya himself in that recent interview.
Absolutely. We've gone from his early days, his rise, the Kingfisher launch and vision, then the crisis, which he blames largely on external factors and policy advice.
Right, through the employee payment issues, his specific explanation about frozen funds, his defense against the willful defaulter label based on settlement offers.
His counterarguments to the CBIED allegations, his views on business failure versus fraud in India, the political football claims.
And finally, his life now, his reflections, and that conditional stance on ever returning.
It's a narrative packed with claims about financial dealings, legal processes, alleged political moves, and a stark contrast between the public image and his personal account, especially those debt versus recovery numbers he highlights.
And just to reiterate one last time, this was all based only on that source material, his interview. We aimed simply to present his perspective, the counterclaims he makes, without taking sides or saying what's true.
Exactly. The goal was just to understand the angles as he articulated them.
So, for you, the listener, hopefully this gives you more to think about. How does hearing his detailed side perhaps change or maybe confirm your view?
Yeah, what does his account make you think about business risk, about media narratives, government interactions, the justice system, especially in these really high-profile cases?
And here's a final thought, sparked directly by those numbers Mallya presented from the source. Given the government reportedly recovered 14,100 crores against a certified debt figure he states was just over 6,200 crores. How does that sit with the willful defaulter narrative, the idea of someone having money but refusing to pay?
Does focusing on those specific numbers as he presents them change the story in your mind? Does it become less about willful default and perhaps more about, say, the complexities of asset recovery after a massive corporate failure or the final outcome of a long, drawn-out legal fight?
And what might that shift in perspective mean for how we think about business failure and accountability going forward? Something to definitely mull over.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
We hope exploring this side of the story, as presented in the source, has given you a more nuanced, if specific, perspective on this complex and ongoing saga.